United States Air Force Academy is an amazing place, steeped in long blue line history and brimming over with stories. I'm Steve Simon, class of 77, and I'm here to tell them. This is the Heritage Minute.
Welcome to a Heritage Minute special with Lieutenant Colonel retired Steve Simon, USAFA class of 77 and U.S. Air Force Academy Association and Foundation writer and historian. And now, here is your host, Steve Simon.
Alongside is Major retired Tom Kroboth, better known as Crow. I've had the honor of knowing him for about 40 years. As he retires, we're getting together to discuss his long and very distinguished career of service to the AOG and the nation. That career culminated with his induction as an AOG honorary member. So, Crow, welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So I understand you entered the Air Force in 1955.
That's
Is that
correct?
So you started your Air Force career the same year as the Air Force Academy started.
Exactly.
So what prompted you to join the Air Force?
Well, I was in the Marine Corps Reserve, and I went to join the Marine Corps, but there was a big line at the Marine Corps recruiting station. So right down the road was the Air Force recruiting office. Nobody was there. So no line, but then I ended up standing in line for the next 26 years.
So the Marines lost is certainly the Air Force's gain. So
That happened.
glad that worked out. What was your main career field, or what kind of duties did you have during your enlisted ranks?
My enlisted, I was a boom operator. I started on KB 29s, which was a World War II aircraft, of course, and they took all the gunners out and they hung a boom on the B-29. And I think I flew on those for about 2 years at Bergstrom in Austin, Texas. And then we had a hailstorm, and because the ailerons and everything were made of canvas, we had to take them to the junkyard because the hail ripped them all off. So, and then the KC-135 came about, and I was one of the young guys who, back when, who was allowed to go along with the senior boom operators. I think I was a 2-striper or a 3-striper at the time.
So yeah, we were all young at one point.
At one point, yes.
So after that, then you got your degrees, from Syracuse. Right?
I was in SAC during the LeMay era, and we pulled a lot of alert. For an entire week, we'd go into the mole hole, or what the alert shack was called. And so I learned to shoot pool, play ping pong, play poker. And I had a navigator at the time who said, hey, you ought to take some courses. So I did. And I gathered 1 semester's worth of work. And then a good sergeant at the education office said, well, you ought to put it in for the Airman's Education Commissioning Program, which I did. And guess what? I was accepted.
And you went to Syracuse. Are you from New York, or was that just the best
I'm
program?
from near Allentown, Pennsylvania, which is on the Philadelphia side. But I did get nominated for AECP. However, I was within 2 months of the age limit. 27 and a half was the age limit at the time. I then had a major operations officer who I didn't get along with. So he put me in for a 90-day TDY to Thailand. Luckily, I knew the sergeant at the education office, and I told him, hey, if I do this, I can't go to OTS. So the Sarge, as usual, knew people who knew people. And while we were flying over the Pacific, my pilot got a message that he was to land at Hickam. And there would be another airplane that will be landing tomorrow with another boom operator on it, and I should get on that other plane and fly home. That was that close.
Yeah, sometimes it helps to know the right people.
Yeah, good old Sarge.
Didn't realize you were from Pennsylvania, as I am too. I'm from Carlisle.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so you were commissioned, and then you first came to the Academy in, I believe, 1978?
That's correct. October.
And were you excited about that, or how did you end up being stationed here?
I ended up being stationed here because of a couple of generals. I worked for 4 or 5, 2 or 3 stars as an officer, and at the time I worked for General Bob Malloy, and he knew Ken Tallman, who happened to be superintendent, and you can guess what happened from there.
Again, gotta know people.
Yeah, Jim Wheeler had put in a request for an editor, and Tallman caught a hold of it and said, "I think I got your guy."
And you had some background in journalism.
Yeah, I got a degree in journalism and speech and public relations.
So you knew the right people and you had the right.
Absolutely.
So back then, of course, long before Doolittle Hall, but the AOG started life in Harmon Hall, and
That's correct.
You were there during that time.
Yes, yeah. I think we were over there for about 1.5 years.
Okay.
And
yeah,
then
I was going to ask you when that move came.
Yeah, I think finance wanted our rooms because we were right across from finance in Harmon, and so they found a place in Saigon, right near 4th Group. So that's where we ended up.
So yeah, when I first started working at the Academy and with the AOG in the mid '80s, in fact, first time we met, the organization had moved to Saigon Hall. So how was that move? It seemed like Saigon had a lot more room than Harmon, or
we ended up with 3 rooms in Saigon, fairly large. We only had 2 rooms over in Harmon, one real small room, and then one large enough to hold filing cabinets and all that.
A little bit better being outside the hustle and bustle of Harmon, too? Maybe not quite as much attention, activity?
Absolutely.
Now, at that point, the AOG was only, 4 or 5, maybe 6 or 8 employees? It was a very small organization.
Oh, yeah. At most, we had 6. Okay. And I think 2 of those were part-time.
Okay. I remember it started with, I think, 4 people. I've always wondered about this, because in those days, the AOG and its employees were part of the Air Force and the Academy, not the nonprofit we are today. What was that like? Was there any type of conflict of interest, or was it weird being essentially an employee of the government and of a business?
It was sort of touch and go. You know, Frida was a civil service person.
Okay, Frida Weber. We'll mention her a little bit later.
And of course, we had her in the directorate of gifts and memorials, and also as an AOG employee. Okay. A lot of people looked askance at that. That, you know, what's a employee, a federal employee, doing working for a private? But somehow or another, Wheeler made it work. So,
because I know the Inspector General of the Air Force Academy did a study and came up with some concerns, as you said, that you've got potential conflict of interest. So then on the 27th of January, 1983, the Academy ended the administrative support. So was that a big deal at the time, or is this just kind of slightly different?
I think by that time,
it was gradual, obviously.
We were already hiring for the AOG and paying from the AOG pocketbook. So
it wasn't a sharp transition. It was more just an evolution almost?
Evolution. Absolutely, yeah. No, we didn't say stop today.
Because I know when the soup said it had to happen, it wasn't like it has to happen tomorrow. It has to happen in 2 years or 3 years. So gave everybody time to make it happen. So, and then, of course, later in 1983, Lieutenant Colonel retired Dick Coppett, class of 61, became the AOG's first president and CEO.
Correct.
And I really enjoyed working with him. I thought he was a great guy. But
Same
what were
here.
your thoughts on him? You obviously worked with him closer than I did.
Bless his soul. Yeah, Dick was a great guy to work for. One of the funny stories is that in his folder, in his graduate folder, was his Dooley picture. And of course, he had no hair, and his ears protruded. So Kathy McCann took the negative over to the comm shop and had blown up. It must have been, I don't know, 2 feet wide, maybe 3 feet high. And welcome Colonel Kopic. So, and he went along with the joke.
And set the tone there, huh?
Yeah, but then somehow that picture disappeared.
Yeah, good man, and he led the organization for quite a while, so did a lot of great work.
Very dedicated dude.
So you were around and largely responsible, in fact, for much of the development of Checkpoints magazine, from a newsletter into the phenomenal award-winning publication it is today. At the beginning, what was your role, and how did it evolve over time?
Well, I was hired as the editor of Checkpoints.
So that was
magazine.
your primary duty.
And but I was also at that time a captain, and consequently Jim was a major, and therefore I was a gopher. Anything that needed to be done, Captain Kroboth got the call, but it was primarily the book that Jim was interested in, and same with Kopic. They wanted it to look fairly good. My degree in journalism is newspapers. So those early magazines looked a lot like newspapers instead of magazines. But I think we skinned a cat.
No, obviously did, and I say the success of the magazine through the years certainly speaks to that. So, of course, you made major and then chose to retire rather than move away.
That's correct?
That happened? Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, Jan and I really enjoy Colorado, and consequently, we decided we didn't. I had 26 years in, which was my big fogey, and I said, "That's good. We'll take it."
And it was one of those. One day you come in to work in uniform, and the next day you come in civilian clothes.
Same desk,
and nothing really changed.
Nothing really changed.
So, among your challenges, I know, was the rapidly changing technology world, and I think I know the answer to this question, given that your first password was "no way." But,
that's correct.
But how did you deal with all that technology?
I really dug my heels in until I kept watching other people do things in half the time that I was doing it with a paper and a pencil. So eventually I decided, well, I'll go ahead and give it a try. And John Fatinos. Well, John's daughter worked in cadet, whoever does the yearbook.
Oh, Cadet Wing Media.
Yeah, Cadet Wing Media.
Yeah.
And she volunteered, and she's a very lovely woman, I might add. She volunteered to help me. And so I went over there about twice a week for a couple hours, and she taught me how to use a computer. I'm still not computer literate, but I can map a book.
I'm good if it does what it's supposed to do, but not if it has any issues, then we have trouble. So one more issue on the magazine, of course, I think by most people would agree the most popular features in the magazine are class news, where we learn about our classmates, and sadly the obituaries, where we learn who is gone but not forgotten. And those were two of your projects, even up until, well, now, I guess. But what was it like? You're essentially the face of the AOG. You're the contact with representatives from each class.
At that time, the AOG was not flush at all, making it from day to day, week to week. So we did the magazine. At first, only the covers were color. Okay. Covers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then the front of the book went color, but obits and class news remained black and white. Well, I knew something about the printing process. And so I said, and I believe Dick Kopic was the guy at the time. I said, well, you know, they send the entire magazine through the 4 colors. So how come I'm only getting black? Anyway, and then that changed, and we got color throughout the book.
Wow, that was a huge transition. So,
yeah, I was very happy with that.
All right, this is interesting. During some research, I discovered that on the 16th of March, 1990, a fire broke out inside John Hall, damaged a storeroom being used by the AOG. In fact, the base paper said it was the loss to the AOG was extensive with merchandising and gift items, as well as office equipment. Do you have any recollection of that
I do.
monumental event?
I was one of the first people down there because I had a key to the storeroom, and mostly what burned were prints, airplane prints that we were selling. Rick Broom was the primary
local
artist.
Yep.
But we also had ordered a bunch of football buttons, which had interchangeable faces for each of the different teams we'd play. And it was a musical button.
Okay.
And it played the Air Force song. So when the fire started, it melted all these things. And when I opened the door, I got 1,000 buttons playing the Air Force song. And I think they just poured water over everything and made it stop. But there's a story behind the Air Force song in that we bought the buttons from Japan. And so we sent them the notes to the Air Force song, just the notes. And the sample came back, and it sounded like, I don't know, a Japanese jazz band or something like
Okay.
that. So I'm a keyboard player, and I happen to have a Hammond at home, and so I actually played the way it should sound, taped it on a cassette. We sent it back, and we got a new 1,000 buttons that played it well.
So the replacements were better than the ones that burned up. So there you go. So it worked out.
So at least the songs were playing well at the fire.
Yeah, I understand that fire was started by some contractors. They were
had torches.
Torches or something? Or?
They were trying to do something, and I think they got a hold of some asbestos, and asbestos burns.
so doubly unsafe. Not only fire, but asbestos as well. So.
Correct.
Okay, so you were, obviously a lot of years inside John, but then you were also with the organization when it moved to the new AOG headquarters building, now known as Doolittle Hall, of course. What was that like? Was that a major experience?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. They had a big meeting outside with the groundbreaking, blah, 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 knew about that. And then the elevator shaft went up. And it stood up, God, it must have been 3-4 months. Nothing was happening. And then I don't know what happened. I think somebody probably kicked somebody to get things moving. And they built a building, but only the first floor was finished. This particular floor, the second floor, was just a slab. Dick Kopic wanted to make a roller rink out of it and charge people a couple bucks in the first case. That didn't happen. And but then we all moved in, and that was it. And I think about that time we had maybe 8 or 9 people full-time working. And they were all AOG employees.
Massive growth since then in all ways. So
Tell me.
All right, so fun fact. You were the second AOG employee to earn honorary AOG member status. Of course, we both worked extensively with the first. You mentioned earlier Frida Weber, and you knew her for many years. What are some of your fondest memories of that relationship? I mean, she was, again, one of the original employees.
A very, very dedicated civil servant. Jan and I got along with them socially, and her husband also, who was a guitar player, and so we visited back and forth personally. She was very, very, very sharp. But as usual, the more an employee does correctly, the more that gets poured on. And so there came a time where we needed to get help for her. And that's when Linda Glazer was hired. Yeah, so that's how that came about.
And she worked here many, many, many years. So.
Right.
All right. So now that you're stepping away and presumably reflecting on your, 45 year or so association with the association, any final thoughts?
I don't know. It's sort of sad in a way, but like I said, that I'm getting a little feeble at 85, and I have a little trouble walking, although I still can walk. But it's been a great road. I enjoyed every minute of it, and I particularly enjoyed the honorary membership. That was great.
Well deserved.
And everybody, I mean, I don't know how many employees have come through since I got here, but never a bad word from any of them. Always got along with everybody.
Well, you've had a massive impact on the organization, obviously, from 1978 to today, and you will certainly be missed. But Crow, thanks so much for coming to visit with us today, and congratulations again on your most richly deserved honorary member.
Well, thank you, and thank the chief, and just thank everybody that helped me along.
Thanks so much.
All right.
You've been listening to a Heritage Minute special with Lieutenant Colonel retired Steve Simon, USAFA class of 77. The Heritage Minute special is a production of the Long Blue Line Podcast Network and presented by the U.S. Air Force Academy Association and Foundation.
Thank you for listening to the Heritage Minute podcast. If you enjoyed this story, we encourage you to subscribe, share it with your family and friends, and post it to your social channels. The podcast drops every week on Sunday. Subscribe to Heritage Minute on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn Plus Alexa, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Search at Air Force Grads on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and more for show announcements and updates. And visit usafa.org/Heritage Minute Podcast for past episodes and to listen to more Long Blue Line Podcast Network programming. I'm Steve Simon, class of 77, and this is the Heritage Minute.